Welcome to Complete BS, the official podcast of couch coaches everywhere. Not just football. It's every sport that ruins your parlay, wrecks your fantasy week, and still brings you back for more. Buzzer beaters, blown leads, and brackets and flames. Yeah, we're all over it. Unfiltered takes, armchair analysis, and enough bold opinions to fill a playbook. Hosted by Brian Schmuck, sports junkie, the Saban of stats, and your official voice of I could coach better than that. Let's go.
Couch Coach Nation, week 3 has come and gone. We've had 3 ranked versus ranked games, so of course you're going to have some losses there, but a rough day for the Palmetto State as both number 11 South Carolina and number 12 Clemson fall to unranked teams. Overall, I think this has been the best weekend of the young year. You didn't have a time slot where it just wasn't enjoyable to watch. AV, how did you enjoy week 3?
Week 3 was the best one so far, man. There's 3 or 4 games we were watching at noon, a couple of games at the 3:30 slot, 7:30, some night games. I'd say most of the games lived up to their billing, too, at least with excitement. LSU, Florida, there was plenty of mistakes to be made. I don't know if that was high-level football, but it was entertaining. I think Notre Dame and Texas A&M was the game of the week, and we'll get into it. But pretty much all of them were entertaining, man. I enjoyed it.
It was a really fun week 3. Really looking forward to the next wave of college football. We're at that quarter pole, 12-game season. We've got 3 games in for most teams. We're starting to figure out who teams are. And there's still a couple teams out there that we don't really know a whole lot about them. But before we get to the games, it's mid-September, and already we've seen 2 coaches get fired. It seems really early in the season to do something like that. Virginia Tech let Brett Pry go, and UCLA moved on from Deshaun Foster. I think with Virginia Tech, there's 2 perfect fits for them. And that's Pat Fitzgerald, the former Northwestern coach. He's been cleared of all wrongdoing with that court case. And then Jimbo Fisher. What makes them unique is neither one's coaching right now. So there's somebody that you could hire and bring into your building right now that can be there evaluating the coaches, evaluating the roster, see what's going on, get a lay of the land so that when the season is over and they take over as that head coach, they're able to put a staff together really quick, know which players that they can ride with, which players that they need to move on from, get active in the transfer portal, and all the high school recruits know who their head coach is going to be. If I'm Virginia Tech, I'm jumping on one of these coaches right away before somebody else snags them. With UCLA, go out to Oklahoma, go get Ben Arbuckle, bring him back to the West Coast. He was at Washington State last year. Now he's the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. He's really young, but sometimes you got to take a chance on that young coach that's never been a head coach, like Kenny Dillingham, Arizona State. They went and got him. Little different there because he's an alum, but a young offensive coordinator, somebody that's going to get a big job. You want to get him in if you can. If I'm UCLA, go get Ben Arbuckle. Virginia Tech, you've got 2 great options there. So you made these moves. You better have a plan in place.
Yeah, it's a little weird to me to fire a coach 2 games in because then you're just saying the rest of the season is a free-for-all. There's a window for the portal 30 days after your coach gets fired. So half the team could jump in the portal and then just redshirt. They haven't played 4 games or just leave. It's a really bizarre situation to put your program in. I don't know the reasoning behind firing them now or just waiting till week 7 or 8. Then you're just playing out the last few games without a coach. But I think they're handcuffing themselves in terms of what this season is going to look like, and that could set you back a few years, although with the portal, probably not so much. I'm interested to see how desirable the Virginia Tech job is. I don't know if that Pat Fitzgerald would want it. I think he's just a bigger name that might want to hold out to see what his other options are. He may go NFL route. He's highly thought of. He had some trouble, and now that's behind him. So I don't know that he would jump on that job. Just me guessing. Jimbo seems like a good fit. I think they make a big play for Shane Beamer, although I don't think he's going there, but that kind of makes sense for them to kick the tires on him. UCLA, I think, is a more attractive job. They're in the Big Ten. They're in the middle of Los Angeles. You can recruit there. You're only recruiting against USC and Oregon. It could be tough, but I think there's plenty of talent in the state of California, and it's a bigger job in a bigger conference. We'll see what they do. I like the name Arbuckle, but I think they could also look for some head coaches at some smaller schools as well.
I think they might also end up looking the NFL route, maybe an NFL retread or an NFL assistant coach. But then again, you're waiting so long, and I don't know that they can afford to do that. Maybe a David Shaw, who is not a on-field coach, but more in a consultant role. And he had success at Stanford, so that could be somebody that they look at. I'm really glad that you mentioned the transfer portal window, and they haven't played 4 games yet, so guys can use this as a red shirt. As an athletic director, you can't make this kind of move until after game 5. You got to get those guys locked in that they can't take that redshirt year. You still have to field a team this year. So really bizarre situation, but I'm sure we'll be talking about that more as the season moves on, and we'll get into our games now that we covered on Friday. We're going to start at the 3:30 window with Georgia, Tennessee. Georgia won this 44-41 in overtime. This was a heavyweight fight that in the end, Georgia extended their streak over the Vols to 9 games. I saw a lot of my friends on social media that were really upset with Mike Bobo and his play calling. And let me tell you, if you score 38 points in regulation in the SEC, you should win a lot of football games. The offense was balanced, 304 yards in the air, 198 yards on the ground. This game almost being lost falls at the feet of the defense and Kirby Smart. You got to tighten up. You've got a bye week, and then you got Alabama coming to Athens. For Tennessee, Joey Aguilar, he played a really nice game for you, and I think you got something there. I think it was the first time that I really saw him and thought, this is somebody that they can build around and have a lot of success as the rest of the season goes along. But I was a little disappointed with their ground game. Only 125 yards on the ground, less than half of what they had been averaging through their first 2 games. I thought they could get a little bit more going with the ground game, but they had things going, and so maybe it was just a little bit of what the coaches felt Georgia was giving them, and that the pass was there and available for them. When Tennessee gets back their top 2 corners from injury, that's really going to help this defense out a lot, be able to shut some folks down. And this is going to be a really tough team down the stretch.
Yeah, Tennessee showed well for the most part. I think the difference in the game was Georgia got physical with them in the fourth quarter. Georgia had almost 200 yards rushing, 198. When they needed to, they started moving things around in the front and eating some clock and moving the ball down the field with the ground game. Gunnar Steiben was good, 300 yards-ish. Joey Aguilar, I think it was 24 for 36 for 371 and 4 touchdowns with 2 interceptions and doesn't win. That's tough at home, too. That is tough, man. What a heartbreaker. And Tennessee lined up to kick the game-winning field goal, and the poor kicker just pushed it right. But they had it right there then in their hands and didn't make the play with the kick. And then you go into overtime, and this is a brutal possession in overtime. They go 3 and out and kick a field goal, and then Georgia scores pretty easily after that. Tennessee showed themselves well, but at some point, you have to win these games if you're going to turn the corner. Josh Heupel's turned that program into a respectable one in the SEC. You're going to have to deal with Tennessee, but if they want to get to the SEC championship game and win the SEC championship game, at some point you can't lose these games. And it's unfortunate. It was a great game, and Georgia deserved it in the end.
Yeah, I thought coming into the year that Tennessee was going to take a strong step backwards this season, and that does not seem to be the case. I think they're going to be in it. They're going to be in the playoff conversation throughout the season. They've got this loss, but they've got a lot ahead of them, a lot of games that they can stack some wins up and get right back into that conversation. They're going to be a really tough out as the rest of the season goes along. And then we get to the 4:30 on the CW, Miami 49, USF 12. This game was over before it started. USF wasn't going to sneak up on Miami with the 2 wins that they had to start the year. The Canes were locked in and focused early. They got up on USF and didn't let their foot off their gas. I've been critical of Carson Beck, but he played an efficient game, 23 of 28 for 340 yards and 3 touchdowns. 2 of those 5 completions, though, were interceptions, so definitely can't be turning the ball over when you're playing a team that has enough athletes to beat you. USF just doesn't have those kind of athletes or that depth. Mark Fletcher, 120 yards on the ground, 16 carries, 2 touchdowns. Him being able to run the ball is something that will take this Miami offense to the next level. As the Canes move forward, if they're able to get that kind of production out of him, this offense is going to be really hard to stop. USF, they were the story of the first 2 weeks. This isn't a poison pill for them, though. They can regroup next week. They've got South Carolina State, a game that they should absolutely win. And then they need to focus on winning the American Conference and try and make the playoff. The battle to win the American Conference is something that I think is going to be fascinating as the rest of the season plays out. Between USF, Navy, Memphis, and Tulane, those 4 are going to be battling it out, and we'll see who gets into that conference championship game and ultimately wins it, because that's going to be your group of 5 representative.
Those are 4 teams that are all fun to watch in their own way, too. So watching that conference will be really fun. The difference in the Miami USF game was a little bit like Georgia, but much more pronounced, where they just controlled the line of scrimmage. They just were too physical, too big, too strong, too tough up front. And the key stat to me was Miami had 205 rushing yards. South Florida had 40. Yeah. Like, that's not going to get it done, especially with a running quarterback that you expect to pick up some rushing yards that way. So Byron Brown had a really good game actually throwing the ball. He was like 23 of 36, 274, a touchdown interception. You look at those stats and you think they're going to be right there in the game. But those were a lot of second half yards, and they couldn't get the ball going on the ground, fell behind in the score. And like you said, it was over early. Credit to Miami for handling business.
And with Miami, it's one of those things we talked about on Friday. I don't know how good Miami is. They've got wins over 0-2 Notre Dame, 0-3 Bethune-Cookman, and 2-1 USF, with next week now they're facing 1-2 Florida. So Miami's still a question. They've got the wins, but jury's out on Miami right now still. We're going to have to wait and see a little bit more as the season goes along.
I do agree. Mark Fletcher looked really good. And if he has a season like he had last night, that's going to help them quite a bit.
Absolutely. Texas A&M with the 1-point win at Notre Dame, 41-40. A&M got their first road win versus a top 25 team since 2014. Notre Dame's now 0-2. Back in 2022, they also started 0-2 with losses to Ohio State and Marshall, and they finished that year 9-4. The remaining schedule's not that difficult. USC and Navy are probably their 2 toughest opponents remaining. So with a 12-team playoff, you can start 0-2 and maybe find your way back through the back door into the playoff conversation, but you have no margin for error at all. You don't have a big game left that you can really hang your hat on and have a signature win. So a really uphill battle for Notre Dame. The door's almost closed, but it's not completely shut. The Notre Dame coaches, I think they did get the message about how they used Jeremiah Love in week 1 against Miami. They gave him 27 touches, 147 total yards, both in receiving and rushing, 2 touchdowns. He played really well. CJ Carr was a little bit hit and miss. You've got a young quarterback only making his second ever start. You're going to see some of those young mistakes out of Carr. On the other side, Texas A&M, Marcel Reed, he put up big numbers passing, but he was less than 50% completion percentage. There's still a lot of mistakes there with them. There's a lot to like about A&M, but there's also a lot of holes. And so while they got the win, again, we're talking about an 0-2 now Notre Dame team. Texas A&M is one of those teams that I don't really know how much I believe in them. I was really surprised by that below 50% completion percentage because it felt like Marcel Reed had a much better game than just the passing numbers. But then when I looked at it a little bit more, he missed a lot of guys too.
Watching that game, Notre Dame's now 0-2. They kind of gift wrapped the game to A&M at the end. They botched the extra point, which left the door open for the win. If you make that extra point, you're probably going to overtime, and who knows what happens. And then they didn't play defense down the last 2 minutes down the field. Then they get the 4th down into the end zone. It was decently covered, but the guy makes a good catch, and everything went right for A&M. But I still felt like A&M played really well, and I felt like Marcel Reed was a difference maker. Now, on one hand, I feel like Notre Dame handed him the game. On the other hand, I feel like A&M's a team to be reckoned with. I think both are probably true. But I'll say, despite the less than 50% passing, 360 passing yards is something for Marcel Reed. I didn't think he had that type of throwing stats in him. I thought he was more of a use his legs and then he'll pop one on you every now and then, but he was standing back there like a pocket passer for quite a bit of the game. I will say that Mario Craver is probably one of the most underrated playmakers in the country. I heard David Pollack say about him earlier in the week that he saw a little bit of Percy Harvin in him, and I thought that was really high praise. But when you watch him, that guy's good. That guy's really good. And you pair him with Marcel Reed and Concepcion, and They've got a lot of speed at receiver. Don't have a lot of size out there, but they got a lot of speed. That offense is going to score a lot of points on a lot of teams this year. It'll be interesting. I think Florida has a really good defense. It'll be interesting to see how their offense does against Florida's defense in 3 or 4 weeks.
I will say for the Notre Dame fans out there, there absolutely was a holding on that 4th down play for Texas A&M where he caught the touchdown to go ahead. In football, you can probably say there's holding on virtually every single offensive snap somewhere along the line, but there was definitely holding that they missed.
He tackled you. As a fan of neither team, really, just a guy watching the game, I wasn't mad they let it go because I wanted to see the play out and see how that worked. But if I was a Notre Dame fan, I would be irate.
Then we get to LSU and Florida, 20-10. LSU wins. Let me first say, Gator fans, you need to stop with the fire Billy Napier stuff. I know you're going to have a long year with a difficult schedule, but there's a lot of talent on this team. I was high on Florida at the start of the year. I had them going 10-2. There were a lot of people that were high on Florida. We didn't just get there off of a guess. They can beat every single team left on their schedule. They've got that much talent. It just hasn't happened for them yet. They haven't put things together. They've had a ton of turnovers, which happened in this LSU game also. They've had a ton of penalties, and both of those things are killing drives. Obviously, the turnover, you've lost possession of the ball, but then the penalties put you behind the sticks, and now you're having to change how you're calling that next play or that drive. Take it down a notch with Billy Napier. I think this team will be fine. They're not going to have the season that you wanted them to have or that most expected, but they're also going to win some games that totally surprise you. LSU, the offense, I was not impressed with LSU at all. It was a ho-hum effort. Maybe in part that's due to the Florida defense that you were talking about earlier about how good that Florida defense is. LSU had one of their touchdowns was an interception return for a touchdown. If you take that off the board, we're talking about a 13-10 ball game here. All the attention's kind of put on Garrett Nussmeier in the passing game for LSU. But I think for LSU to be successful the rest of the way down the season, they need to get Caden Durham as the number one option for this offense, not Nussmeier. Nussmeier's a nice player. He might make a nice pro. Aaron Anderson has been a really solid weapon for them in the passing game. But if you get Durham going, he provides you that opportunity to grind the clock down, wear out the opponent. You'll get those shots with Nussmeier. He'll still get his yards. But I think LSU has a pass first and sprinkle in a little run. I firmly believe they need to switch that around. Run Durham first. He needs to be your number one option if you want to get far into the playoffs.
I don't know that there's ever been a team that's 3-0 with 2 wins that are pretty good wins that hated their coach more than they probably hate Brian Kelly right now. It just doesn't look good. Like you talked about penalties for UF killing them, but it's not just the penalties. It's penalties on scoring plays. And I don't know how that happens so often to one team, but there was 2 touchdowns against USF that were wiped off the board because of penalties. And then there was one against LSU where Lagway rolls out left and finds Jaden Ball wide open down the sideline for an 80-yard touchdown. Called back. Not just called back, but then penalty yards tacked on top of it. So now it's 3rd and 20. So each team had 12 drives apiece. So 24 drives. There was 12 punts in that game. LSU had 12 drives, 7 punts, 1 interception, a touchdown, and 2 field goals. UF had 12 drives, 5 punts, 5 interceptions, a touchdown, and a field goal. A couple of those interceptions were good plays by LSU. Most of them were not good throws by Lagway. At least the last 2 were really bad. One turned into a pick 6. So, you have a touchdown called back and then you give them a touchdown on a pick 6 and the game's just different. But I agree with you on Napier. If you can get the turnovers and the penalties cleaned up, you're going to win some games this year. I think you beat Texas at this point, or you're at least in the game. Texas looks brutal. That's at home. You go in there and don't have any turnovers and limit the penalties, you're going to be in that game. They've got a really good defense. They don't give up a lot of points. They gave up 20 to LSU, and pick 6, 7 of them were on the offense giving it up. They gave up 18 and 13 points from the defense. What is Arch Manning going to do with that? And to give Nussmeier and LSU a little bit of a break, they've played Clemson's defense and Florida's defense, so I want to give them a break on that. But then they scored 23 against Louisiana Monroe or whoever they play. So they don't look good against anybody.
And for the 3rd game in a row here, we're talking about the winning team that, well, how good are they really? LSU has a win over Florida, who's 1-2. They've got a win over Clemson, who also now is 1-2. So a lot of questions. We got teams that are winning, and hey, that's the name of the game. You got to win. That's what you're here to do, is win the ball games. They're doing that, but there's still a lot of questions around them. Gator fans, if there's one thing that I think you can jump on Napier for, give up the play calling, Billy. Let somebody else do that. Let somebody else see the field a little bit differently than what you're seeing and the flow of the game. Manage the game, make some big decisions, but let somebody else get in the minutia of play calling and also how you're setting up your week there. That's definitely a gripe that I would have as a Gator fan, is Billy needs to let go of that, let somebody else handle it, and we'll move on.
Real quick on the play calling. I don't mind his play calling too much. I think their offense looks good between the 20s until they have a penalty or something. But Lagway threw the ball 49 times. That's a big number for a guy who's not looking great. So you talk about 5 interceptions. He's not himself currently, and I don't know why that is, but everyone thought he would be a Heisman candidate coming to the season, and he's not looked that at all. So when your guy's not looking comfortable out there, to throw the ball 49 times, you're asking for 5 interceptions.
This wasn't a shootout, and it wasn't a game that you were, and you weren't behind a lot. Why are you abandoning Jaden Ball in the run?
Great question.
That goes to my question on play calling there. A couple of game balls to hand out. You remember in the preseason, we were talking about Missouri running back Ahmad Hardy?
Yep.
22 carries, 250 yards for 3 touchdowns. Ahmad Hardy gets a game ball. And then off the bench with the surprise start, Ole Miss, Trinidad Chambliss gets the start for a hurt Austin Simmons. No big deal. He goes 21 for 29, 353 yards passing and a touchdown, and then added 15 carries for 62 yards and 2 more touchdowns on the ground. Lane Train, you got something there with both Austin Simmons and Trinidad Chambliss, a 1-2 punch. Who's your number one? Game ball for Trinidad Chambliss.
I'll throw one over to Mario Craver. I mentioned him before, but 7 catches, 207 yards, and a touchdown. Playmaker all over the field. He helps any offense right now.
Next week, our games that we're going to preview, we've got Texas Tech at Utah, who I personally believe that should be the college game day site. I think game day completely got it wrong. Why they're going to UF Miami, I don't get it. Texas Tech Utah would have been a great game. Ranked versus ranked. Auburn at Oklahoma, another ranked versus ranked. And then Illinois at Indiana, ranked versus ranked. Any one of those 3 would be a great spot for game day, but they're going to South Florida in what they should have done maybe this week. But that's the 3 games that we're going to preview next week. Our Complete BS Top 25. This is available on X every Sunday morning. You can get my Top 25 starting out at number 25, Tulane. 24 is Tennessee, dropping down. I didn't have them as high last week. We'll see where everybody else has Tennessee. 23, South Carolina. 22, Vanderbilt. 21's Arizona State. 20, Indiana. 19, BYU. Utah is at 18. Back-to-back right there. That's going to be a great holy war this season. Number 17, Alabama. 16's Nebraska. 15, Georgia Tech coming off the big win over Clemson. 14's Ole Miss, 13 Texas Tech, 12 Texas A&M. I'm somebody that did not have A&M ranked before this week, so that's a big jump from unranked up to number 12. Number 11, Iowa State, 10 is Texas, 9 Illinois, 8 the Oklahoma Sooners, 7's Florida State, 6 is Georgia, 5 LSU, 4 Penn State, 3 Miami, 2 Oregon, and 1 Ohio State. The top 8 for me stayed the same. Nobody moved around in those top 8.
The following week, the 27th, there's a lot of good games. Alabama, Georgia, Penn State plays a rank. Is that Oregon, Penn State? The week after that? So there's some big-time games coming up. We'll still have fun this week. College football delivers regardless.
And with that Oregon-Penn State, we're going to have former Penn State All-American and Miami Dolphin O.J. McDuffie on talking about that Penn State-Oregon game. But that's everything that we've got this week. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us on X or Instagram at Complete BS Pod. We'll check you later, Couch Coach Nation.
Thanks for listening to Complete BS. Be sure to subscribe, share, and follow us online. And tell us what you think of this episode. Use hashtag CouchCoachNation. And let's keep the conversation going.